When a woman pulls away, the most common reflex in men is not confidence, not patience, not self-control, it is the desperate need for validation. This mistake is subtle, automatic, and emotionally driven, which is why it's so destructive. The moment distance appears, the man's inner dialogue changes. Questions flood his mind. Did I say something wrong? Is she losing interest? Is there someone else? Instead of sitting with uncertainty, instead of allowing space to exist, he rushes to eliminate discomfort. And that urgency is exactly where attraction begins to die. Validation-seeking behavior doesn't start with dramatic actions. It starts quietly. A double text. A check-in that isn't really a check-in but a disguised plea for reassurance. Hey, you've been quiet lately. Everything okay? Did I do something? On the surface, these seem reasonable, even caring. But psychologically, they communicate something very different. They say, my emotional stability depends on your response. And that message, whether consciously or unconsciously received, shifts the power dynamic immediately. Attraction is built on polarity. One person grounded, the other responsive. One steady, the other drawn in. When a man begins to chase validation, polarity collapses. He moves from grounded to reactive, from confident to uncertain, from self-directed to approval-seeking. And once that shift happens, the woman doesn't feel closer, she feels pressure. Pressure kills desire far faster than silence ever could. Here's the hard truth most men avoid. When a woman pulls away, she is often observing. Not plotting, not manipulating, but observing. She is sensing how emotionally regulated you are. She is feeling whether your confidence is real or performative. Anyone can appear confident when everything is going well. But distance reveals truth. Distance exposes whether your sense of self is internal or borrowed from her attention. When a man seeks validation, he reveals that his confidence was conditional. It only existed when she was present, responsive, affectionate. The moment that condition disappears, so does his composure. That creates emotional weight. Instead of being someone she feels drawn toward, he becomes someone she feels responsible for. And desire cannot survive responsibility. Many men believe that explaining their feelings will fix the situation. So they send long messages, paragraphs about how much they care, how confused they are, how deeply they feel. They believe vulnerability will pull her back. But vulnerability without emotional strength is not attractive, it is overwhelming. True vulnerability is calm and grounded. Validation-seeking vulnerability is frantic, it asks to be soothed. It asks to be reassured. It asks her to stabilize emotions that are not hers to manage. And here's the irony, the more a man asks for reassurance, the less reassurance he receives. Not because the woman is cruel, but because she senses that any reassurance she gives will only create more need. One reply turns into another question. One explanation turns into more insecurity. So she retreats further, not out of lack of interest but out of self-preservation. Silence, on the other hand, does something powerful. Silence communicates trust in yourself. Silence says, I am okay whether you come closer or not. Silence creates space for curiosity. It allows her to feel the absence of your attention without feeling chased by it. Validation-seeking robs her of the chance to miss you. It fills every gap with anxiety instead of presence. Another layer of this mistake is overavailability. When a woman pulls away, men often respond by becoming instantly available at all times. They reply faster. They cancel plans. They rearrange schedules. They prioritize her above everything else. Again, this seems loving on the surface. But psychologically, it signals low self-value. It tells her that your life has no center without her. And that is not flattering, it is alarming. People are drawn to those who have gravity. Gravity comes from direction, purpose, and inner stability. When you orbit someone else instead of standing in your own center, you lose that gravity. Validation-seeking behavior is orbiting. It places her at the center of your emotional universe. And when someone is placed on a pedestal, they don't feel desired, they feel burdened. There is also a deeper fear driving this mistake, fear of loss. Many men don't chase validation because they want reassurance, they chase because they fear abandonment. They believe that if they don't act, don't speak, don't clarify, the connection will disappear. But this fear creates the very outcome they are trying to avoid. Fear-driven behavior is felt instantly. It leaks through tone, timing, and intention. And fear is not attractive. Confidence is not loud. Confidence does not demand answers. Confidence does not collapse under uncertainty. Real confidence allows ambiguity to exist. It understands that attraction is voluntary. It knows that no amount of explanation can force desire. Validation seeking tries to negotiate attraction, and attraction cannot be negotiated, it can only be inspired. There is a psychological principle at play here. People value what feels earned, not what feels freely given out of fear. When attention is given calmly and selectively, it has weight. When attention is poured out in panic, it loses value. The man who chases validation floods the connection with emotional currency, devaluing it in the process. Many men also make the mistake of apologizing unnecessarily during this phase. They say sorry for things that were never wrong, sorry for texting, sorry for calling, sorry for being annoying. Each apology chips away at perceived confidence. It reframes normal presence as a problem, and once you position yourself as a problem, you invite distance. What's crucial to understand is that restraint is not indifference. Silence is not punishment. Pulling back emotionally is not manipulation. It is self-regulation. It is choosing not to act from insecurity. It is trusting that if the connection is real, it does not need to be chased into existence. Validation seeking also blocks growth. Instead of asking, why is she pulling away? The stronger question is, why does this distance destabilize me so much? That question leads inward. And inward is where power is built. Men who master their internal reactions become emotionally solid. And emotional solidity is rare and therefore attractive. When you stop chasing validation, something interesting happens. You reclaim your time. Your focus returns to your mission, your goals, your body, your friendships. Your life expands again. And expansion is magnetic. Women don't chase men who are watching the phone, they chase men who are living. And here's the final psychological shift that separates weak reaction from strong presence. Acceptance. Acceptance that you cannot control another person's emotions. Acceptance that interest must be mutual. Acceptance that walking away with dignity is better than staying without desire. The man who accepts this does not need validation because his worth is not under negotiation. When a woman pulls away, the test is not whether you can get her attention back. The test is whether you can remain yourself without it. And the men who pass that test rarely need to chase anyone. When a woman pulls away, the second major mistake men make is far more dangerous than chasing validation, because it happens quietly and often goes unnoticed. They lose their frame and abandon their purpose. This isn't about one action or one message, it's about a slow internal collapse. The man's identity begins to bend around her absence. His routines weaken, his discipline slips, his goals fade into the background. Without realizing it, he hands over the center of his life to someone who has already stepped back. Frame is psychological structure. It is how you see yourself, how you interpret events, and how you maintain direction regardless of external changes. A man with a strong frame doesn't need constant emotional feedback to stay grounded. He has momentum. He has priorities. He has a life that moves forward with or without romantic validation. When that frame is intact, attraction feels safe and effortless. When it collapses, everything feels heavy. The moment a woman pulls away, many men unconsciously pause their life. They stop going to the gym with the same intensity. They delay work. They cancel plans with friends. They sit in mental limbo, waiting for a reply, waiting for clarity, waiting for her emotional temperature to change. Their entire internal state becomes reactive instead of directed. And that shift is felt even if nothing is said out loud. Attraction does not grow in stagnation. Desire feeds on motion. When a man's life slows down because a woman creates distance, he communicates that she is the source of his momentum. That is not flattering, it is destabilizing. It suggests that without her presence, there is no forward movement, and no one wants to be the engine of someone else's existence. This loss of frame often disguises itself as loyalty or commitment. Men tell themselves they are being patient, understanding, emotionally available, but underneath there is fear of moving forward without her. Fear that if they continue living fully, they might lose her. So they freeze themselves in place, hoping proximity will return. Psychologically, this creates the opposite effect. Stillness repels, motion attracts. A woman is drawn to a man who has direction because direction signals safety. It signals competence. It signals leadership. When she senses that her presence or absence dictates his emotional state, that sense of safety erodes. Instead of feeling drawn in, she feels pressure not to love him but to stabilize him, and that is not the role of desire. Another aspect of losing frame is changing behavior to please. Men begin adjusting opinions, values, boundaries, and even personality traits to align with what they think she wants. They soften edges. They suppress confidence. They avoid expressing needs or standards out of fear of pushing her further away. This creates a version of the man that is smaller, quieter, and less authentic. And authenticity is the foundation of attraction. When you abandon your frame, you stop leading your own life. You begin following emotional cues instead of setting direction. Conversations become cautious. Decisions become delayed. Energy becomes muted. The man no longer feels solid, he feels tentative. And tentative energy is invisible to desire. There is also a deep psychological imbalance created when a man loses frame. He becomes outcome dependent. His mood, confidence, and sense of worth hinge on whether she re-engages. This creates emotional volatility. One message lifts him. Silence crushes him. That instability leaks into interactions. Even if he says all the right things, the energy underneath feels unstable. Humans are extremely sensitive to this, especially in romantic dynamics. A strong frame allows uncertainty to exist without panic. A weak frame demands certainty to function. When a man cannot tolerate not knowing where he stands, he unconsciously seeks control. That control might show up as overcommunication, subtle pressure, or emotional withdrawal meant to provoke a response. None of these are rooted in strength. They are rooted in discomfort with ambiguity. Purpose is the anchor of frame. Purpose doesn't mean hustle culture or obsession with productivity. It means having something bigger than the relationship that you are building toward. A mission, a direction, a sense that your life is expanding. When purpose disappears, the relationship becomes the sole source of meaning. And when that happens, any distance feels catastrophic instead of neutral. Women don't want to be the meaning of a man's life. They want to be a complement to it. When you place someone at the center of your existence, you don't honor them, you trap them. Because now, any decision they make carries the weight of your emotional stability. That weight is heavy. And most people instinctively step away from heavy emotional responsibility. Losing frame also leads to self-betrayal. Men tolerate behavior they normally wouldn't. They accept inconsistency, mixed signals, and unclear communication without addressing it. Not because they are okay with it, but because they are afraid of losing the connection entirely. Over time, this erodes self-respect. And when self-respect erodes, attraction follows. Respect is not something you demand, it is something you embody. When you uphold your standards calmly and consistently, others respond accordingly. When you abandon them to keep someone close, you teach them how to treat you, and that lesson is rarely reversed. Another overlooked element is energy. Purpose generates energy, direction generates presence. When men lose their purpose, their energy dulls. Conversations feel flatter, humor fades, passion disappears. The man becomes emotionally available but energetically absent, and attraction responds far more to energy than words. Men often believe that focusing on themselves during this phase will appear uncaring. In reality, the opposite is true. A man who continues building, growing, and living fully communicates emotional abundance. He signals that he is choosing connection, not needing it. That distinction changes everything. Choice is attractive, need is not. There is a powerful psychological truth here. The way you respond to distance defines your perceived value. If distance causes you to shrink, you appear low value. If distance causes you to stay steady, you appear high value. Not because of arrogance, but because of self-trust. Self-trust is magnetic. Holding frame does not mean becoming cold or detached. It means remaining anchored. It means responding, not reacting. It means your life does not pause because someone else hesitates. It means you allow people to choose you freely instead of trying to hold them in place through emotional sacrifice. The man who maintains his frame understands something crucial. If she returns, it should be to the same grounded, purposeful man she was drawn to, not a diminished version shaped by fear. And if she doesn't return, he still moves forward intact. That is power. When you keep your purpose alive during moments of uncertainty, you communicate strength without words. You don't need to explain, you don't need to convince. Your consistency does the work. And consistency is rare in an emotionally reactive world. Ultimately, losing frame is not about her pulling away, it's about you letting go of yourself. The distance didn't cause the collapse, it revealed what was already unstable. And the solution is not control, persuasion, or patience, it is alignment. Alignment with who you were before fear entered the equation. A man who stays aligned does not beg for attention, he does not chase clarity. He does not pause his life waiting for permission to move forward. He understands that attraction follows those who are already going somewhere. And when a woman senses that, even from a distance, she feels something powerful, respect. And where respect exists, desire has room to return. When a woman pulls away, the third mistake men make is reacting emotionally instead of strategically. This mistake is the most revealing because it exposes a man's level of emotional control under pressure. Anyone can appear calm and confident when things are going well. But distance creates uncertainty, and uncertainty triggers emotion. What a man does in that emotional space determines whether attraction collapses completely or quietly rebuilds. Emotional reactions are fast, impulsive, and driven by fear. They feel urgent, they demand expression, they want immediate relief. Strategy, on the other hand, is slow, intentional, and rooted in self-awareness. It tolerates discomfort. It observes before acting. When a man reacts emotionally, he gives away power. When he responds strategically, he retains it. The most common emotional reactions are anger, guilt, and passive aggression. Some men lash out. They feel rejected, so they attempt to regain control by expressing frustration or disappointment. They accuse. They say things like, "If you're not interested, just say it," or "I don't like being ignored." While these statements may feel honest, they are emotionally loaded. They place pressure on the woman to manage his feelings, and pressure suffocates attraction. Other men take the opposite route, guilt and self-blame. They apologize excessively. They assume responsibility for the distance without evidence. They say, "I'm sorry if I upset you," or "I know I probably messed things up." This reaction communicates weakness, not accountability. It shows a lack of emotional grounding. Instead of appearing reflective, the man appears fragile. And fragility invites caretaking, not desire. Passive aggression is even more damaging because it disguises emotional reactivity as control. Short replies, delayed responses meant to provoke curiosity, coldness used as punishment. These behaviors are attempts to regain power without direct communication. But psychologically, they reveal insecurity. They show that the man is still emotionally hijacked, just expressing it indirectly. Emotional reactions feel justified in the moment because they are fueled by fear of loss. The mind interprets distance as danger. It triggers survival instincts. Fight, flight, or freeze. Anger fights, guilt freezes. Passive aggression manipulates. None of these are attractive responses because none of them signal emotional leadership. Emotional leadership is the ability to remain centered while others fluctuate. It is the ability to regulate yourself instead of demanding regulation from someone else. When a woman pulls away, she is often unconsciously asking a question. Can this man stay grounded when things are unclear? Emotional reactions answer that question with a no. One of the biggest misunderstandings men have is believing that expressing every emotion equals honesty. In reality, emotional discipline is a higher form of honesty. It means you acknowledge what you feel without allowing it to control your behavior. Strategy does not deny emotion, it contains it. It chooses timing, it chooses restraint, it chooses self-respect over relief. Men who react emotionally often believe they are standing up for themselves. But true self-respect is quiet. It does not beg to be seen. It does not demand immediate acknowledgement. It simply adjusts behavior in alignment with values. If distance appears, the self-respecting response is not to chase, accuse, or withdraw emotionally. It is to maintain composure and continue forward. Another emotional trap is catastrophizing. Men assume the worst. They create narratives in their head. She's losing interest, she's testing, she's found someone else, it's over. These stories amplify emotion and justify reactive behavior. Strategy requires neutral interpretation. Distance is just distance until proven otherwise. The man who understands this does not spiral, he waits. Waiting, however, is misunderstood. Strategic waiting is not passive. It is not sitting by the phone. It is not suppressing emotion while internally collapsing. Strategic waiting means redirecting energy. It means focusing on health, work, growth, and purpose. It means allowing space without attachment to outcome. That detachment is not cold, it is confident. When men react emotionally, they often seek closure prematurely. They want answers now. They want to define the relationship immediately. They want certainty to eliminate anxiety. But closure demanded under emotional stress rarely brings peace. It brings finality. Strategy understands timing. It knows that not every moment requires resolution. Sometimes space resolves things better than conversation ever could. There is also an ego component to emotional reactions. Rejection or perceived rejection threatens identity. Men tie their worth to being chosen. When that choice is delayed or withdrawn, ego reacts. It demands validation or control to restore balance. Strategy bypasses ego. It understands that attraction is not a verdict on worth. It is a dynamic that changes based on energy, timing, and alignment. Strategic behavior prioritizes long-term outcomes over short-term emotional relief. Emotional reactions feel good in the moment because they release tension. You say what you feel, you get it out. But that release often comes at the cost of attraction. Strategy tolerates tension because it understands the value of restraint. Silence is one of the most misunderstood strategic tools. Silence is not manipulation when it comes from self-regulation. It is not a tactic to provoke. It is simply choosing not to act from instability. Silence allows emotions to settle. It prevents damage. It gives space for curiosity and reflection. Emotional reactions fill silence with noise, and noise kills intrigue. Another emotional reaction is over-explaining. Men try to clarify intentions, feelings, and expectations all at once. They believe that if they communicate enough, the problem will disappear. But attraction does not respond to logic, it responds to presence. Over-explaining reveals anxiety, not clarity. Strategy communicates less, not more. Emotional reactions also distort perception. Men begin reading into every signal. A delayed reply becomes a rejection. A short message becomes disinterest. Strategy zooms out. It looks at patterns, not moments. It understands that attraction ebbs and flows. Emotional reactions treat every fluctuation as a crisis. A man who reacts emotionally loses the ability to observe. Observation is power. When you observe without reacting, you gather information. You see how the other person behaves when unpressured. You see whether distance is temporary or intentional. Emotional reactions contaminate the data. They change the dynamic and then blame the outcome. Self-control is not suppression. It is mastery. A man with self-control can feel disappointment, confusion, and desire without letting those emotions dictate his actions. That mastery is rare, and rarity creates value. Women are drawn to men who can hold emotional space without collapsing into it. There is also a deeper psychological effect of emotional reactions. They reverse polarity. Instead of being the emotional anchor, the man becomes the emotional wave. The woman becomes the stable one by default. That role reversal kills attraction. Desire flows towards stability, not chaos. Strategic response means staying consistent, not mirroring her distance with resentment, not escalating intimacy to compensate, simply staying the same. Consistency builds trust. Emotional reactions destroy it. They make interactions unpredictable, and unpredictability creates emotional fatigue. Men often fear that if they don't react, they will appear indifferent. In reality, calm presence communicates confidence. It says, I am interested, but I am not controlled by interest. That balance is the core of attraction. The ultimate strategic move when a woman pulls away is not a move at all, it is composure. Composure communicates that you trust yourself, that you trust the process, that you do not need to force outcomes, and people are drawn to those who are not trying to force them. Emotional reactions are understandable, but they are optional. Strategy is a choice. It requires awareness, discipline, and patience. But the payoff is immense. You preserve dignity, you preserve attraction, you preserve self-respect. When a man learns to pause instead of react, everything changes. His words carry more weight. His silence carries meaning. His presence feels solid. And even if the woman never returns, he does not lose himself in the process. That is the true power of strategic emotional control. It is not about winning someone back. It is about remaining whole regardless of outcome. And paradoxically, wholeness is what makes people want to come closer again. The man who reacts emotionally is at the mercy of circumstance. The man who responds strategically creates stability in chaos. And in relationships, stability is the rarest and most attractive force of all.